It has brought a sense of relief to those who were concerned about the very high tariffs of 50% that had been in place since September of last year and which now appear to go away. However, we're still awaiting details on the sequencing, and I think we should expect in the next few days a joint statement by the two governments that will outline next steps, including the technical details on how to proceed forward with this trade deal. So we saw on Monday, 2 days back, U.S. President Donald Trump announce a slash of Indian tariffs to 18%, and the conclusion of a trade agreement. This has also been welcomed by the Indian government. Today, in fact, Minister of Commerce and Industry, Piyush Goyal, outlined at least the Indian perspective on what it was seeking to achieve. It has brought a sense of relief to those who were concerned about the very high tariffs of 50% that had been in place since September of last year and which now appear to go away. However, we're still awaiting details on the sequencing. And I think we should expect in the next few days a joint statement by the two governments that will outline next steps, including the technical details on how to proceed forward with this trade deal. So the critical minerals is an issue that is animating the US government from the White House down. It is something that President Trump has spoken about on many occasions as being important. And in fact, the US government has several different initiatives to improve the security of the critical mineral supply chain. Because I think there's a real understanding that it is vital for any country seeking to make advancements in key technologies, critical civilian technologies, but also in terms of military applications as well. So it is a very important issue that's understood and that is shared by India, as well as concerns about the over concentration of supply chains related to critical minerals, not just the mining, but also particularly the processing, which China now in some ways dominates that supply chain. So what we saw just in the last few days in Washington was a meeting chaired by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. About 50 plus countries were represented there, several at the ministerial level, including India. It is part of an ongoing set of conversations. Previously, last month, we had a Minister for Electronics and IT, Ashwini Vaishnav, attend a similar meeting chaired by the US Treasury Secretary on how India and the US and other partner countries can work together to collaborate on critical minerals. So I think this is something India is very keen on. You saw that in the union budget as well. But now finding ways to actually translate that into projects that will help strengthen those supply chains will be key. I mean, I think this had been announced earlier, even prior to President Trump's announcement on trade. So this had been in the works for some time. But look, I think it's now a part of a restart in some ways of political level engagement and cooperation between the US and India on a wide variety of issues, whether strategic issues, defense and security cooperation, energy, technology. India will be hosting an AI summit late in a few weeks, and we expect some participation from the United States as well, particularly the private sector. So I think it's just part of the restart of conversation dialogue at a senior level between the US and India. And now, if the trade agreement has been announced, as it's implemented, it will obviously open room for other forms of collaboration. I mean, I would refer people back to the February 2025 joint statement between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. There, they outlined quite an ambitious vision for the US-India partnership centered on four main pillars, which were defense and security, emerging technologies, trade, and energy. And on all four, I think our trade has been stuck. The other three, we actually saw some collaboration continue over the past year. I think now it is time, perhaps, if the trade issues can be resolved, to actually move forward on some of those areas of cooperation. And then, in addition to that, some of the strategic cooperation between the US and India in two key areas, particularly. One is in the Indo-Pacific. India is supposed to host the next Quad summit. We don't have dates on that, and now we'll see whether the conversation starts again about rescheduling a summit in India. And secondly, in the Middle East and West Asia, what India calls West Asia, whether we'll see a return to US-India strategic cooperation in that area. It's hard to say, but I think two things to keep in mind. One is India's imports of Russian oil have declined in the past few months due to a variety of factors. Some of it has to do with sanctions by the US and its partners against key Russian entities, particularly the two largest oil exporters, Lukoil and Rosneft. Some of it also has to do with the discounts that Russia had previously offered India, and some other buyers have expired or declined. So it is less cost effective than it used to be. There's also more oil coming online, crude oil coming online, giving India options of where to buy, including from the US itself, from Brazil, Canada, Guyana, Venezuela, other places, and Africa as well, Africa and West Asia. So I think all of those factors will play in. But ultimately, I think energy security is important. It is a function not only of strategic choices, but also of market economics. And this is it's a globally traded commodity. So it's hard to say, but I think these are important factors to keep in mind. It's possible. Actually, up to a few years ago, I don't recall the exact date. I remember looking this up about 5, 6 years ago, and at that time, India was briefly the largest importer of largest market for Venezuelan crude oil, slightly ahead of China. US was a distant third. So India has a past of working using Venezuela as a source. A lot of that has shifted over the past few years to Guyana and other sources. Some of it may come back online. I think that again is a function more of the stability and the economics of whether that is viable for many international oil companies. I can't speak for specific ones, but many of them still deem Venezuela to be not stable enough to risk long-term investment. But if I think some of those concerns are able to assuage, we had the vice president of Venezuela speak with Prime Minister Modi recently, just a week or two ago. So I think there is a possibility of that coming online, but again, it's due to factors that are outside simple strategic choices made by the Indian government or Indian leadership. Not necessarily. I think the Trump administration, second Trump administration, came in with a clearer idea of what it wanted from the Quad. It wanted a more streamlined agenda focused on four key areas, including maritime security, homeland security, technological and economic security. And India and the other partners, Japan and Australia, seemed to be willing to work with that. We've had a continuation of working group levels at the Quad. In fact, just last month there was a counterterrorism Quad working group that India hosted in New Delhi, with all four countries participating. We've had a continuation of military exercises, but the what has been postponed repeatedly now has been a Quad summit by the leaders, which India had been expected to host. Now I think the conversations can begin again about possibly scheduling it for this year, or possibly on the sidelines of an existing summit that is taking place. So I think that it's more the political level engagement can now potentially restart.